The morning started quietly in the small apartment. For the first time in months, Claire woke up to the soft sound of birds outside the window. The golden sunlight filled the room, and Sophie was still sleeping soundly, hugging her favorite teddy bear. Claire smiled faintly, feeling a calm she hadn't known in a long time. She got up quietly, walked to the kitchen, and made herself a cup of coffee. As she watched the steam rise, a thought crossed her mind. This is peace. Simple, but mine. With a mug in her hands, she walked to the living room and opened the curtains, letting the sunlight brighten the space. The apartment was small, but Claire had transformed it. A colorful blanket draped over the couch, plants on the windowsill, and photos of her and Sophie in small picture frames gave it a cozy, warm atmosphere. Moments later, Sophie appeared in the living room, rubbing her sleepy eyes and her hair messy. "Good morning, Mommy," the little girl said, yawning. Claire smiled and knelt to hug her. "Good morning, sweetheart. How about pancakes for breakfast?" Sophie grinned excitedly, nodding her head. While her daughter watched a cartoon, Claire made the pancakes. The sound of Sophie's laughter mixed with the sizzle of the frying pan brought back a sense of life that Claire thought she had lost. "I'm beginning to create the home I always wanted for us." By late morning, as Claire folded clothes in the bedroom, the phone rang. She looked at the screen and saw Adam's name. A knot formed in her stomach, but she took a deep breath and answered. "I want to pick up Sophie today. I'll be there in an hour," Adam said coldly. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, gripping the phone tightly. "Adam, you know we agreed on schedules in advance. Today is not planned." His tone grew more aggressive. "So now I have to schedule a time to see my daughter? This is ridiculous, Claire. You're keeping her from me." Claire's heart raced, but she remembered Megan's words, her lawyer's advice: be firm. Don't give in to his manipulation. "I'm not keeping anyone from you, Adam. We need to stick to the agreement for Sophie's sake." "You've always been good at playing the victim," he retorted with disdain. "Don't worry, Claire. Sophie will figure out who you really are." The call ended abruptly. Claire stood still for a moment, her hands trembling. His words still had the power to hurt her, but now something had changed. She looked at a picture of Sophie smiling and thought, "He can't control me anymore. I won't let him." Later that day, Claire and Sophie were sitting on the living room rug, working on a puzzle together. Sophie was quiet, her brow furrowed in concentration. But Claire noticed something was bothering her. "You look thoughtful, sweetheart. Do you want to talk?" Claire asked softly. Sophie looked up at her mother, hesitant. "Daddy said you don't want me to see him. Is that true, Mommy?" The words hit Claire hard, but she smiled gently, trying to remain calm. She held Sophie's small hands and looked into her eyes. "No, sweetheart, that's not true. Daddy and I are just organizing the days so everything works better for you." Sophie thought for a moment and nodded slowly. "I like our new house. It's quieter here." Claire felt tears form but held them back. She hugged her daughter tightly, kissing the top of her head. "Mommy is doing everything to make you happy, my love. Always." After Sophie had gone to sleep, Claire sat on the couch with a cup of tea and opened her journal. She stared at the blank pages for a moment before she began to write. "Today, Adam tried to shake me again. For years, he made me feel small, voiceless, and worthless. But now, every time I say no, I feel like I'm freeing myself a little more." Sophie asked about him. "Part of me feels guilty, but I know I'm doing the best I can." I won't let her grow up believing that love hurts or controls. For the first time in a long time, I believe I'm strong enough for this. I'm starting to rediscover myself, who I am, what I love, what I want for the future. And this is just the beginning. She closed the journal and looked out the window. The stars shone in the dark sky, like tiny signs of hope. I promised myself I would give Sophie a better life. And now I believe I can. It was a Saturday morning, and the apartment was filled with the comforting smells of pancakes and coffee. Claire and Sophie were sitting at the breakfast table, laughing as they competed to see who could make the most perfect pancake. Suddenly, the sound of a message on Claire's phone broke the lightness of the moment. She picked up her phone and saw Adam's name on the screen. "I'm coming to pick up Sophie now. Get her ready. I don't care what we agreed on." Claire felt her heart race for a moment, but she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She knew he would do this, break the agreements to test her boundaries. Sophie watched her, sensing the change in her mother's expression. "Who was that, Mommy?" Sophie asked curiously. Claire smiled softly, hiding the tension. "Nothing important, sweetheart. Let's finish breakfast, okay?" Moments later, the doorbell rang insistently. Claire went to the door and opened it. Adam was standing there, his expression hard and his gaze challenging. "Claire, I came to pick up my daughter." "Today is not the scheduled day, Adam. If you want to spend time with her, we need to follow what was agreed upon." Adam stepped inside, invading her space. "You're not going to keep me from seeing my daughter. Who do you think you are?" Claire straightened up, maintaining the calm she had fought so hard to regain. "I'm her mother, and unlike you, I respect the agreements. I won't allow you to come in here and intimidate me." He clenched his fists, visibly frustrated, but Claire didn't back down. She held her ground, waiting. "This isn't over, Claire. You'll regret this." He turned abruptly and left. Claire closed the door and, for a moment, leaned against it, feeling her heart racing. But then, she looked into the living room, where Sophie sat with worried eyes. Claire took a deep breath and smiled at her daughter. "It's all right, sweetheart. We don't need to worry about that now." She knew Adam would try again, but for the first time, Claire felt that she was no longer alone against him. She had a plan, support, and above all, a strength that he could never take away from her. Later that day, Claire sat in Megan's office, her attorney. The walls were lined with shelves of neatly organized folders, and the distant sound of a phone ringing filled the air. "He showed up again, Megan. He completely ignored the agreement," Claire said firmly. Megan nodded, taking notes as she listened. "Adam is trying to destabilize you emotionally. That's his pattern. He breaks the rules to test if you'll give in. But you did the right thing by standing firm. But what if he takes this further? What if he tries something legally?" Megan smiled firmly. "Claire, you're protected. We have records of the messages, the attempts at control, and the broken agreements. Document everything. The more he breaks the rules, the more he damages his own position." Claire took a deep breath, feeling a confidence she hadn't felt before. She looked at Megan and smiled softly. "Thank you, Megan. For the first time, I feel ready to face this." In the afternoon, Claire decided to take Sophie to the park. The sun shone gently, and the trees swayed in the breeze. Sophie ran through the grass, blowing bubbles that floated in the air. Claire sat on a bench, watching her daughter, feeling the tranquility of the moment. As she looked at Sophie, she reflected on how far she had come. No matter how hard Adam tried, he couldn't take this away from her. Her daughter's smile, the small apartment full of life, and the peace she was learning to cultivate. Claire took her journal from her bag and began to write. "Today, Adam tried again, but I realize he's fighting something he can no longer control, my strength. Every time I say no, every time I hold my ground, he loses the power he once had over me. I'm no longer the woman he knew, and that fills me with pride. There are still hard days, but I'm winning. I'm free. And my daughter is learning what real love is. Gentle, respectful, and safe." Sophie came running back, laughing and holding a handful of flowers. "Mommy, look. These are for you." Claire smiled, taking the flowers lovingly. "They're beautiful, sweetheart." "Thank you." As she hugged her daughter, Claire looked up at the blue sky above them. For the first time, she felt that the future was truly in her hands. That night, Claire was at home, organizing some papers. She looked at the list of things she had accomplished in the past few weeks. 1. Establish clear boundaries with Adam. 2. Consult Megan and ensure legal protection. 3. Protect Sophie emotionally. Claire smiled, feeling proud of herself. She picked up a small mirror from the table and looked at her reflection. For the first time, she saw someone strong, resilient, and capable. "I'm in control now, and I will never lose myself again," she whispered to herself. She closed her eyes and let the fatigue of the day dissolve, ready for tomorrow. It was a Sunday morning, and Claire had decided to do something different. The sun streamed through the apartment windows, illuminating the space as Sophie colored drawings on the living room rug. Claire tied her hair into a bun and grabbed a water bottle in the kitchen. "Mommy's going out for a bit, sweetheart. Aunt Lindsay will stay with you," she said calmly. Sophie looked at her mother, curious. "Where are you going, Mommy?" Claire smiled softly as she put on her coat. "I'm going to try a yoga class in the park. It's something new for me." Satisfied with the answer, Sophie nodded with a smile and went back to her drawing. On the way to the park, Claire felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. For so many years, she had put her own desires aside. Now, every small choice felt like an act of courage. When she arrived at the park, she found a small group of people on colorful mats, all breathing deeply to the sounds of the wind and birds. The instructor, a friendly woman with a calm voice, greeted her warmly. "First time?" Claire smiled a little shy. "Yes, I'm allowing myself to try something new." The class began slowly, with gentle movements and deep breathing. Claire closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight on her shoulders start to lift. It was as if she was finally learning to let go of everything she didn't need to carry. Breathe deeply. Let it go. When the class ended, Claire sat on the mat for a moment, looking up at the blue sky. Her heart felt lighter. "I can do this. One day at a time, I'm finding who I am." That afternoon, Claire returned home with a subtle smile. Lindsay, her longtime friend, was on the couch playing with Sophie. "So, how was this yoga class you mentioned?" Lindsay asked curiously. Claire sat beside her, laughing softly. "It was freeing. Who would have thought I'd enjoy something so simple?" "I felt alive." Lindsay smiled, proud of her. "You're changing, Claire, and it's beautiful to see." Claire looked at Sophie, who was focused on her drawing. She moved closer and sat beside her. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Sophie held up the paper. An image of the two of them walking in the park, surrounded by colorful flowers. "This is us, Mommy. Us happy." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "It's beautiful, my love. This is our best drawing yet." Later, Claire decided to go out alone for a coffee at a local cafe. It was a small step, but for her it was a symbol of freedom. As she waited for her order, she flipped through a book she had brought in her bag, something she hadn't done in years. "Here's your coffee. Enjoy," the barista said, handing her the cup. She thanked him and chose a table by the window. Watching people pass by on the street, Claire felt, for the first time, that she was present in the moment. There was no fear, no guilt, just peace. Suddenly, a polite voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, you dropped this." Claire looked up, surprised. A tall man with a calm expression and a gentle smile held out a handkerchief she hadn't even realized she had dropped. "Oh, thank you. I didn't notice." "No problem. Have a good day," he replied, walking away before Claire could say anything else. She watched him leave, not even asking his name. Something about the simplicity of the moment made her smile. "I don't need someone to be happy, but maybe one day I'll be ready to let something new happen." That night, after Sophie had fallen asleep, Claire sat on the sofa with her journal in her lap. She paused for a moment, staring at the blank pages before beginning to write. Today was a good day. For the first time, I did something for myself. The yoga class, the coffee alone, the simple smiles. These are small things, but they are bringing me back to myself. I lived so long in fear, forgetting who I was. Now I'm discovering that I like to read, that silence can be comforting, and that life can be light. There are still challenges, there's still Adam, but he's no longer the center of my world. Sophie and I are my world, and I will keep taking care of this new home I'm building. Closing the journal, Claire looked out the window. Outside, the city carried on, but inside her, a new life was beginning to grow. I'm stronger than I thought, and I'm just getting started. It was a quiet afternoon. Claire was sitting in the living room helping Sophie with a school project. The soft sound of instrumental music filled the air as they worked together, cutting colorful pieces of paper. Suddenly, the phone rang. Claire looked at the screen and saw Adam's name. Her heart skipped a beat, but she took a deep breath and answered. "We need to talk." "Now," he said, cold and direct. Claire frowned. "If it's about Sophie, we can talk later. I'm busy. This can't wait. I'm coming over." Before she could respond, he hung up. Claire stood still for a moment, the familiar knot in her stomach threatening to return. But something inside her had changed. She was no longer the woman who trembled at his manipulations. Claire looked at Sophie, who was engrossed in her project, and smiled softly. "I'll be back in a second, sweetheart. Keep working on your drawing." She walked into the kitchen, grabbed her phone again, and quickly sent a message to Megan, her attorney. "Adam is coming over unannounced. I'll document everything." Minutes later, the doorbell rang. Claire opened the door and found Adam standing there, his expression tense and gaze heavy. He walked in without being invited, looking around as though searching for something. "The house looks nice," he said with sarcasm. "Looks like you're doing better than I thought." Claire crossed her arms, holding her ground. "Why are you here, Adam? If this is about Sophie, just say it." He stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "Do you think you can keep going like this? Keeping our daughter away from me? Treating me like a stranger?" "I'm serious, Claire. I'm going to file for custody. I'll prove you're not capable of taking care of her alone." Claire's blood froze for a moment. But then, like a wave, certainty washed over her. He no longer had power over her. She lifted her gaze and replied calmly, "You're not worried about Sophie, Adam. You just want to punish me because you can't control me anymore." He stepped forward again, his voice growing more aggressive. "Watch what you say. You'll lose this fight." Claire took a step back, keeping her distance, and took a deep breath. "You can threaten me all you want, but I'm ready. I have evidence, records, and a lawyer who knows all your attempts at manipulation. If you want to take this to court, be my guest. But don't think I'll ever give in to fear again." Adam stood still for a moment, surprised by her firmness. For years, he had seen Claire as a fragile, silent woman. Now he was facing someone he could no longer intimidate. "This isn't over, Claire," he murmured, his anger barely contained. He turned and left, slamming the door behind him. Claire stood there for a few seconds, her heart racing, but at the same time, she felt relieved. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "You don't have power over me anymore." After Adam left, Claire returned to the living room. Sophie looked at her with curiosity, sensing that something was different. Was Daddy angry? Claire smiled softly, sitting down beside her daughter. She touched Sophie's face gently and replied, "Daddy is going through a hard time, sweetheart. But that's not your fault or mine. What's important is that Mommy is here and will always take care of you." Sophie nodded, still a little thoughtful, then smiled. "I like being here with you, Mommy." Claire felt tears welling up, but she held them back. She hugged her daughter tightly and whispered, "And I love having you here with me, my love. Always." In that moment, Claire realized how far she had come. She hadn't just stood up to Adam. She had also protected Sophie with a strength and love she never thought she had. That night, after Sophie had fallen asleep, Claire sat on her bed with her journal in her lap. She opened the pages and began to write. "Today, Adam tried to threaten me again. He said he would fight for custody of Sophie. But for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt strength. For so long, I let him define me, make me doubt myself. But now I know who I am. I'm a good mother. I'm strong. I'm capable. Adam no longer has power over me. He can shout, threaten, and manipulate, but I am free. And I will keep fighting for the peace I'm building for myself and my daughter. Claire closed the journal, took a deep breath, and looked out the window. Outside, the stars shone in the dark sky. Small reminders that she was on the right path. I'm winning, and he knows it. The sun shone gently through the windows of the small apartment, announcing a new day. Claire woke up feeling something different. A lightness in her chest, as if a heavy cloud had finally started to lift. She got up with a faint smile and went to Sophie's room. Her daughter was still sleeping peacefully, hugging her inseparable teddy bear. Claire knelt down, adjusted the blanket, and kissed her forehead. "Good morning, my princess," she whispered. In the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee and toast with jam filled the air. She turned on some soft music on the radio and began preparing breakfast. Moments later, Sophie appeared with messy hair and sleepy eyes. "Did you sleep well, sweetheart?" Claire asked, opening her arms to her. "Yes, Mommy," Sophie yawned. "Today is Saturday. What are we going to do?" Claire poured a cup of milk for her daughter and sat beside her with her own cup of coffee. For the first time in a long time, she felt she had choices. "How about we go to the park today? Just the two of us. We can have a picnic and play for a while." Sophie's eyes lit up. "Yes, I'm taking my teddy bear." Claire laughed softly. "Then it's a plan. Let's enjoy the day." The park was full of life. Children ran. Families had picnics. And the sun shone through the leaves of the trees, creating dancing shadows on the ground. Claire and Sophie found a quiet spot under a large tree and spread out a colorful blanket on the grass. "This is the best picnic ever, Mommy," Sophie exclaimed, her mouth full of sandwich. Claire laughed and looked around. Seeing Sophie so happy filled her with joy. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath and letting the fresh air fill her lungs. "I never thought such simple moments could mean so much." After eating, Sophie ran off to an area where other children were playing. Claire sat on the blanket, watching her daughter from afar, holding a bottle of water in her hands. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel fear, guilt, or sadness. On the other side of the park, she saw a couple strolling, people walking their dogs, and children flying kites. Life was moving forward, and now so was she. She pulled her journal out of her bag and wrote, "Today I felt peace. There are no voices in my head telling me I'm not enough. There is no guilt, just a simple moment, full of life. I am present. I am here." That afternoon after the park, Claire let Sophie watch a cartoon and called Lindsay. "I think we spent 3 hours at the park today. Sophie is exhausted and happy. And I think I am too," she said, laughing lightly. "That's wonderful, Claire." Lindsay responded enthusiastically. "You're living. You're creating memories with your daughter, and most importantly, you're taking care of yourself." Claire smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. "Sometimes I look back and wonder how I held on for so long. But now, it feels like I'm getting to know myself again." On the other end of the line, Lindsay paused before answering, her voice full of affection. "You deserve this, Claire. Every smile, every small moment of peace. Keep going. The future is yours." Claire thanked her and hung up the phone. She looked over at Sophie, who was laughing at her cartoon, and thought, "I'm building the future I've always wanted, one step at a time." That night, after putting Sophie to bed, Claire sat on the sofa with a cup of hot tea. She watched the city lights shining in the distance through the window. For so long, that view had brought loneliness and fear. Now it brought hope. She opened her journal again and wrote, "Today, for the first time, I felt whole. I'm no longer the woman who doubts every choice. I'm no longer a prisoner of fear or guilt. I am strong. I am free. And life, this simple and precious life, is mine again. There are still challenges, but I'm ready to face them. Because now I know who I am." Claire closed the journal with a soft smile. As she looked at the stars through the window, she murmured to herself. I'm ready for whatever comes. It was a Monday morning. After dropping Sophie off at school, Claire decided to stop by the grocery store to restock a few essentials. The day was beautiful, with a clear sky and a light breeze that made her hair dance gently. As she pushed the cart through the aisles, she felt a new calm inside her. It was strange to realize how simple activities, like grocery shopping, now felt like moments of peace, moments that belonged to her. She stopped in the produce section and began picking out apples, carefully inspecting each one. Too green, this one looks good, she murmured to herself, holding one up. Suddenly, one of the apples rolled off the counter and fell to the floor. Claire quickly bent down to pick it up, but another hand reached it first. When she looked up, she met the gaze of a tall man with short brown hair, soft features, and a kind smile. I think this apple was trying to escape, he joked, holding the fruit lightly. Claire smiled, surprised by the light-hearted comment. Looks like it didn't want to be chosen today. Well, it's back in the right hands now, he replied, handing her the apple. Feeling her cheeks warm slightly, Claire smiled politely. Thank you, a quick rescue. The man chuckled softly and gestured toward the counter. You have a talent. I take half an hour just to pick out an apple. Claire let out a genuine laugh, surprised at the ease of the moment. I guess it's just practice. They exchanged a smile before he stepped back, giving her space. It was a pleasure saving your apple. Have a good day. You too. As he walked away, Claire stood still for a moment, holding the apple in her hand. An involuntary smile spread across her face. It hadn't been anything significant, just a casual conversation with a stranger. But something about the lightness of the encounter made her feel alive. For years, I avoided any kind of connection. But this was just a conversation. And it was good. She placed the apple in her cart and continued her shopping list, but she couldn't help thinking about the man with a kind smile. Back at the apartment, Claire was putting away the groceries while Sophie excitedly talked about her day at school. Mommy, today the teacher said I drew the best rainbow. Claire smiled, happy for her daughter. I bet it was beautiful, sweetheart. I want to see it as soon as I finish putting these away. As she organized the fruit, Claire paused for a second while holding the same apple the man had returned to her. She laughed quietly to herself, feeling a lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. It was just a conversation, Claire. It doesn't mean anything. Even as she tried to dismiss the moment, she knew it was important. For the first time, someone outside her life had brought a natural smile to her face, without guilt or fear. Later that afternoon, Claire took Sophie to the park. Sophie ran straight for the swings, laughing loudly, while Claire sat on a bench with a cup of tea in her hands. The park was calm with few people around. Claire watched her daughter play, feeling gratitude for the simplicity of the moment. Suddenly, her eyes were drawn to someone on the other side of the park. It was him, the man from the grocery store, sitting on a bench, focused on a book. He hadn't noticed her, but Claire observed him for a moment. It's him, the man from the store. She felt a quiet curiosity, free of fear or anxiety. Just a small, pleasant interest. Before she could think more about it, Sophie ran up to her, pulling her back to the present. Mommy, look at the drawing I made in the sand. Claire smiled, turning her attention to her daughter. It's wonderful, sweetheart. When she looked back toward the other side of the park, the man had already closed his book and was leaving. Claire took a deep breath, feeling a small knot of nervousness and, at the same time, a different warmth in her chest. Maybe the universe is trying to tell me something. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. She laughed at herself, brushing the thought away, and refocused on her daughter. That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Claire sat on the couch with her journal in her lap. She stared at the blank pages for a moment, trying to organize her thoughts. Today I met someone. I don't know who he is, or why our conversations linger in my mind. But it was light. It was simple. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to smile without fear. I don't know if it was just a coincidence or a small sign of something more. What matters is that I'm open to it, whatever it may be, because I'm no longer trapped in the past. I'm here now, and that's enough. She closed the journal with a soft smile, turned off the light, and looked out the window. The stars shone in the sky, and Claire felt that something new was beginning to take shape, slowly in its own time. Whatever it is, I'm ready, she murmured to herself. It was a calm, sunny Saturday morning. Claire and Sophie were in the kitchen of their small apartment, preparing a pancake recipe together. Sophie's laughter echoed through the room as Claire helped her daughter mix the batter. "Mommy, I think I put in too much milk," Sophie said, giggling as droplets of batter splattered on the table. Claire let out a warm laugh, wiping her daughter's nose with a cloth. "That's okay, sweetheart. Special pancakes always come with a little mess." The sweet smell of fresh pancakes filled the air. Claire paused for a moment, watching Sophie smile with her bright eyes and rosy cheeks. Her heart swelled with gratitude. "We did it. We're okay." After breakfast, Claire left Sophie with Lindsay for an afternoon of playtime and decided to take some time for herself. She stopped by her favorite cafe, where the aroma of coffee and fresh bread always brought a feeling of comfort. She chose a table by the window, a book open and a warm cup in her hands. The moment was hers, simple and precious. "I guess the apple the other day wasn't enough for an official meeting." Claire looked up, surprised, smiling involuntarily at the familiar voice. Ethan stood there, holding a cup of coffee and that same light smile. "I didn't know you came here," she replied, trying to sound casual. "I could say it's a coincidence," he teased, pulling out a chair, "but the truth is, I like this cafe as much as you seem to." Claire laughed, closing her book. The conversation flowed naturally, as if they had known each other for a long time. They talked about hobbies, travels, and childhood memories. Claire learned that Ethan was an engineer who worked on sustainable projects in the city. "I like building things that last," he explained. "Something people can look at and say, that brought a little beauty and purpose to the world." She was quiet for a moment, admiring the calm and sincerity in his words. "That's a beautiful way to look at life." Ethan looked at her, his eyes gentle and attentive. "And you, Claire? What would you like to build?" Claire took a deep breath, surprised by the question. After a moment, she smiled softly. "A life where peace is constant, where happiness doesn't have to be perfect, but real." He nodded, as though he understood exactly what she meant. By late afternoon, the two left the cafe and walked through a nearby park. The sky was beginning to turn pink, and the first stars appeared on the horizon. "You have a calm about you that's impressive," Ethan said after a while. "Like you carry something deep, but you're still learning to let it go." Claire smiled, looking up at the starry sky. "I am learning, yes. For the first time, I feel like I'm in control of my life." Ethan stopped walking, turning to look at her with admiration. "That's rare and valuable. Don't let anyone take that from you." Claire's heart beat faster. For the first time in a long time, she felt no fear. Ethan wasn't trying to save her, fix her, or judge her past. He simply saw her. For a moment, silence enveloped them, but it was a comfortable silence, full of understanding. Then, slowly, Ethan took a step toward her. "Claire, I don't know what you've been through, but I see the woman you are now, and that's inspiring." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. "Thank you for seeing me." Ethan smiled softly and gently leaned in. Claire closed her eyes and allowed the moment to happen. They shared a kiss that was light, tender, and full of meaning. There was no rush, just the meeting of two souls who respected and understood each other. When the kiss ended, Claire smiled, her heart feeling light. "This isn't the end. It's a new beginning, my beginning." The next morning, Claire woke up early with the sun touching her face. Sophie was still sleeping in the room next door. She made a cup of tea and sat at the table with her journal open. "For so long I was afraid to start over, afraid to be happy, afraid to lose myself again. But today, I realize that true new beginnings start within us. I've discovered my strength, my voice, and my peace. And now I'm ready for whatever life brings. Because I'm no longer a prisoner of the past, I own my future. And most importantly, I love myself. Finally, I love myself. Claire closed the journal with a smile. She looked out the window, where the clear sky announced a day full of possibilities. The best is yet to come, she whispered to herself. Claire and Sophie are seen walking hand in hand through the park, their laughter and lightness filling the air. The leaves on the trees dance gently in the breeze, and the open horizon stretches before them, full of promise and hope.